everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. We are on City Council's special meeting tonight regarding the budget workshop. It is a little past 5 o'clock. We'll get roll call, please. Mayor Yuba? Here. Vice Mayor Harris? Here. Councilmember Buckman? Here. Here.
Here.
Could you bow your heads as I pray? Almighty Father, first let me say thank you on behalf of those who are gathered here tonight. We're truly blessed with your presence. We ask for your guidance and clear vision so the efforts of staff and council in this community will be a benefit to those that live and work and enjoy Yuba City. It's in your most blessed name that I pray. Amen. Amen.
Salute. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So as far as our general item tonight is the proposed 2018-2019 operating budget and capital improvement project budget. So we have staff.
You do. You've got a staff presentation. So good evening, I'm Steve Crager, your city manager. Throughout this room you have each one of the directors of your respective departments in the city. You also have a retired fire chief, so I'll point that out as well. So what is this evening about? This is we call this a workshop. That means there aren't any decisions made this evening. There might be council input on different matters, or public input for that matter as well. The official consideration of the budget will occur in 2 weeks. So that gives ample opportunity for additional time for budget review by all the people in this room and by the general public, and for folks to come back by June 5th and give additional comment if there is any before the council considers it. I have an overview, a very brief overview. Your finance director, Robin Bertagna, has a comprehensive overview of the full budget document. And then we have follow-up on that, capital improvement program from Public Works. And then we'll also touch upon our utility rates. So the utility rates were set, that's water and sewer rates, they were set 3 years ago now, or 2016 they were set. So there was a 5-year step up to make sure that we have adequate funding, not only for operations, but also for capital investment. I'll just say that too many communities wait till capital investment goes too long and degrades, and then they turn it into a crisis. Yuba City, thankfully, has had the foresight as a council to say we want to put the money into our systems so that we make sure that we're preparing for the future. So we have a step up, the steps up, and we'll get an idea of where we are in that step up process as we look to the future. Thanks to our IT department and finance for this beautiful screen here. It looks great. These are your priorities. They're long-standing priorities. It's kind of neat. This year we have a little hand in the middle of the screen. Now it's gone, but that's good. So I call these inalienable, meaning every community that's functioning well should have priorities that are similar to these. This is what we do as a city. We provide public safety. The economy, government is about the economy. The economy is what drives our community, and we're here as a government to provide services to the community to make sure that we thrive. So we should focus on how we support to advance that economy. Maintain and improve our infrastructure, the roads we drive on, the water and sewer, and so on in our facilities. Develop our organization, that's what government's about. We provide services, so we should make sure we have top quality people working on our organization and grow them. We should be preparing for our growth. We are 68,000 people, and we are 15 of 25 square miles of sphere of influence. So we are looking to expand and double in size. That is what that's not staff's vision, that's the community vision that Arnaldo Rodriguez in Development Service oversees as our general plan. And our planning commission oversees as that development happens. Enhancing our image and reputation is something actually in the last few years we've been very proud to see happen naturally. As our community has been recognized not only by the Milken Institute, but also to have the first woman Sikh mayor. So with that, we'll go on to jump to the next slide. This is the highest level overview. You have a $42 million general fund budget that you'll be delving into, an enterprise fund budget, water and wastewater, of about $26 million. Others, you're going to roll up to the front page of your budget, you're going to be about $80 million. So I share that with you to give you some perspective on the magnitude of what type of business you're running. It's not a little business, it's a big business, and we provide essential services to the community. Furthermore, you have a proposed CIP budget allocation of $142 million. I don't know what portion of that is your Fifth Street Bridge, but I guess a large portion of it. Something to be very proud of. So, what we have done in the last couple of years is we've sought feedback from the community about what their priorities are. We've been doing this at the end of our calendar year. We've been doing community surveys. We formalized it this year by doing a scientific survey and going out and saying, what are your top priorities? We heard back from folks. We presented that information at your study session in March. And from that, we have gotten an idea of where folks would like to see investment in the city. So yeah, over 1,000 residents. So moving on. So what are these priorities? Here they are. I won't read them out to you. You can read them. If I had to lump them into 2 or 3 areas, which I think a slide, I've only got a few more slides so you get some perspective. Really it's about public safety. It's about keeping our youth out of trouble and on the right track. And it's about our roads. Those are the 3 areas. So I touch upon roads because that's probably the one that's easiest to quantify. I think, we know as a community, we're a conservative community. That serves us well. It served us well for a long time. This is an area that we are not alone in. All of us drive throughout California. We see the types of roads that we drive on. In fact, we just had a meeting last week that had to do with addressing the annexation area, the keyhole area. And I don't have a map before me, but a gentleman brought in a clear canister a portion of his road. Now, luckily for us, it could have been a city road. In this case, it wasn't. It was a county road. But that's a representation of a person saying, he said, this is my road. What are you going to do about this? There's no magic bullet to that because they're pretty good sized chunks, but he went out and picked up part of his road and put it in there. And so Diana's, our Public Works Director, put together a great presentation. It's actually 2 years ago that was put together, in 2016. And that addressed that we need approximately $6 million annually to invest in our road system of 220 miles of roads?
A little bit more than that.
A little bit more. Okay, so a little bit more. Maybe I'm thinking of water lines or sewer lines. It all blends together after a while. But yeah. But that gives you an order of magnitude of the road system we have here in our city, which is a small, intimate city, but 220 miles, if you were to drive that would take you a little while. And so we are currently spending $1.5 million annually. That includes the SB1 money that was recently allocated through the state of California process. So we're funding at the 25% level, which, as we know, is not adequate in order to maintain our road system. I don't know if I take comfort in knowing everyone else is in the same situation, but that's just what it is. So also touched upon the youth programs that need to be maintained. And I would say that right now Yuba City does a remarkable job with our youth programs. Going on, these are the 3 community priorities. This is my last slide. So what message do I want to leave you with? I want to leave you with the fact that you have a staff of 300 people that do their very best as a community to provide these services. And I would say they are second to none. That said, why are we reaching out to the community? Because of a critical thing. I'll just say it's to identify the wants, needs, and desires of this community and whether or not the status quo is what we want as a community. And that's why we went out, and staff did that. We initiated this as part of the survey of what they wanted. The question of, If there were a revenue measure on the ballot, what's your likelihood of voting on it? 59%, so a majority of the people came back and said they'd be supportive of it. That might not be representative of the people in this room. People in this room tonight might say, hell no. But it's an indication of what this community wants and what its desires of. Do we want the status quo? I've been here 24 years, so I can say, do we? Or do we want something in these areas that will enhance our services in the community, provide for better roads, provide for better youth programs, and put more into our public safety element? And that's the question that we'll continue to engage the community over these coming months and get more feedback from them. So that sets the stage. And with that, absent any questions from you, I'll turn it over to Rob.
Thank you, Steve. Do you have any questions for Steve at this time?
Sure.
I'd like to just make a comment. I'm
Yeah.
a resident of the Keyhole,
Yeah.
and the guy who brought that, to be honest with you, it looked like a piece of chip seal to me, so he probably went over to where you guys just did a great job of chip seal, like on Pelora, and probably picked it up there. The roads that he tried to tell you they're that way, that's not really how they are. And to be honest with you, the city does a phenomenal job on the roads. I think we have great roads.
I appreciate that
After working
feedback.
in Yuba County and working in Yolo County, let me tell you what, these roads are paved in gold compared to those places. So, you know,
That's a good way to sum up my presentation.
there you go.
Thank you.
So I think from that standpoint, we're perfectly fine there. I mean, I think the city public works does a great job. I personally had an issue on Gray Avenue where I was riding my trike before somebody stole it, and the sidewalk was messed up, and it flipped me over and threw me off the trike. And yes, I was wearing a helmet and staying. It still didn't knock any sense into me. I made one call to Diana's office. Within 3 days, they were, well, actually, I think probably within a day, they were out there putting barricades up to keep people away from it. Within 3 days, they were fixing it. That's superb service in my book.
Thank you.
Although I am in the county, that was superb service in my book.
Thank you very much.
And for the record, can you state your name, please?
Chris, last name is Starkey, S-T-A-R-K-E-Y.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that.
And for everybody that wrote to you, how much did you just pay them to say that?
Not enough. Why do you think you guys are looking at a sales tax increase? No, I'm joking.
We want
Any other questions or?
And I'll be here for the duration, so if something pops into your mind in a bit, I'm happy to answer then as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions? Okay, you're on, Robin.
Okay, great. The city's general fund is the biggest portion of our budget. It's our major operating fund. Our biggest operating funds are the general fund and the water and wastewater fund. Diana will be doing an overview of the water and wastewater funds at the end of tonight's presentations. But I'm going to get into the details for you of the general fund and more specifically what's changed since last year's budget. You all approved last year's budget. This year's budget has changed both in revenues, salaries and benefits, and materials and supplies and services. So I'll break down those changes for you in those three areas. This shows you the city's overall budget allocations, with about 60% going towards public safety. When I'm preparing this each year, I always look to see what's changed. And this year, the fire slice of the pie went down a little bit percentage-wise because of the completion of the SAFER grant. It's due to expire in August, so the 9 SAFER grant employees were removed from the budget while we're waiting to hear whether or not we receive another allocation. Hopefully we'll find out in August whether we've received that or not. But other than that, there hasn't been much change from one year to the next in how this budget pie looks and the percentages attached to it. And I wouldn't expect it to change much from year to year because City Council has stated that their largest goals are public safety and infrastructure maintenance. So that's where we're putting our budget dollars, where council stated goals are. This shows you the changes in total general fund revenues over time. There are 10 years of historical data along with the 2018 fiscal year projected and then the fiscal year 19 proposed allocations. You can see that we're projecting revenues will actually go down between the projected 18 and the proposed 19. That is again related to the SAFER grant. Revenues are actually up, but when you take out the SAFER grant revenues, because we can't project that we'll receive them next year until we find out the status of next year's grant, it actually shows a decline in revenues. This is a similar slide for expenditures, and it's broken down into the same categories. It shows 10 years of history, current year projected, and next year's proposed budgeted data, along with salaries and benefits being the yellowish color and material supplies and services being the more gold color. The difference between the proposed 19 revenues of $42.4 million and expenditures of $42.1 million is your current budget surplus proposed at $301,356. And I want to bring your attention to the fact that it's only the second year that the city's had a surplus on a budget basis since fiscal year 09. So that is good news for us. Looking at where we came from in the more recent 5 to 10 years. What's changed, this is a summary of what has actually changed. The operating budget surplus that we brought forward from fiscal year 17-18 was $226,000. Revenues have gone up $832,100, which would be even more if not for the removal of the SAFER grant revenues. Salaries and benefits actually went down, which is a little bit surprising, I'm sure, to everyone. I'll show you the details of those changes as well. Materials, supplies, and services went up, which decreases any available surplus. Plus, we included capital acquisition items of $75,500 specifically to the general fund, and I'll go through those with you as well, leaving the proposed budget surplus of the $301,000. This shows you where we've been over the last 10 years, budget surplus, several years of deficits, and then in their most recent 5 years and this year's proposed budget, we have surpluses. Those are due to vacant position savings. I have a footnote at the bottom of this slide that shows you how much the vacant positions saved at the end of every fiscal year. 1.2 million, 1.6 million, 1.9, 1.7, and about 2.7 million. Significant savings that has allowed the city to set money aside in a pension stabilization trust to fund some infrastructure improvements, etc., that we wouldn't have been able to do without those vacancies. But it only makes sense for us to plan to spend those savings dollars for one-time expenditures, whether it's putting towards our pension stabilization trust or one-time capital needs for the general fund, instead of trying to program them into our ongoing budget for expenditures, because they're not expected to be reoccurring. At some point, we do expect to be fully staffed.
Do you have any questions regarding this? This tells it's the big story that it tells, and I think Robin did a really good job of explaining it.
So for 18, 2.7 million is due to salary savings, so we would have been in the hole over $1 million if it wasn't for that.
No, I'm actually, and I'll show you, I can understand why that's confusing when it says down here, I'm thinking we're going to have about 2.7 million in salary savings. We're going to use some of those dollars from, materials, supplies, and services, so that we'll actually overexpend that category. And then I'm also proposing some transfers at year end to fund some items for next fiscal year, and I'll walk you through that in a little bit. But what I'm actually expecting to be left when that's all said and done is about $1.5 million for this year.
Okay. That's good.
So our unmet financing needs, and please stop me anywhere along the line if you have questions. I'm here to answer your questions, clarify anything that's confusing. We've talked about these unmet financing needs that we previously identified. I like to show them to you every year and to talk about what progress we've made towards meeting those needs. We're still not where we would like to be with our CalPERS unfunded liability, even our deferred infrastructure maintenance and replacement, BEAT 6 startup costs. We're waiting to see where the annexation goes and what happens with that before we need to fund those. Construction of park facilities in Tierra Buena and economic development initiatives. Those are all priorities of the council that we continue to try to put money towards. As far as progress made, the CalPERS unfunded liability, we've established a pension trust fund. $2 million was set aside in fiscal year 17. Another $330,000 was added from the surplus from fiscal year 17. And I'm anticipating, and we'll show you tonight what I'm asking you to take a look at, setting aside another $700,000 from the expected surplus of about $1.5 million this year. Our UAL, our unfunded actuarial liability, increased from $59 million in 2015 actuarial reports to $73.3 million in the 2016 actuarial reports. So we're trying to set some funds aside to start whittling that down.
If you could explain why that jump is in there?
It continues to jump because CalPERS continues to change their assumptions. They do their demographic study and determine that people are living longer. They've lowered their discount rate from 7.75%, their anticipated return, down to 7.5%, and then down to 7.375. We're going to 7.25, and ultimately to 7. So when they lower how much they project to earn on their investments, it causes our unfunded liability to go up and how much the city needs to contribute for pensions to go up. And I've got more data on that a little bit later as well.
Yeah, so my question would be, well, if you're saying, Rob, it's going to go from 7.375 down to 7, how's that going to affect these numbers? Wow. So that unfunded liability will, so you can anticipate the following year and the year after that, that 73.3 will continue to move in an upward direction. So.
Definitely. As far as dealing with our deferred infrastructure maintenance and replacement, we put money aside in fiscal year 17 into our capital improvement program budget. A lot of those funds are still being carried over. The projects haven't moved forward yet. In addition, we added some more money in fiscal year 18, and this is a list of some of the bigger projects that we've allocated funds to in the past 2 years. The annexation process is underway for Beat 6. We'll determine if we need to set aside the funding for the startup costs, depending upon the results of the annexation process. We do have funding set aside in our one-time money fund that we can put towards one-time costs. We also have capacity available in our operating budget to fund the net costs necessary to hire staffing and do the master tax exchange agreement with Sutter County should the time come for that to happen. Construction.
And Robin, on that, just as a point of clarification, you know, if the annexation doesn't go, we still have an obligation that's been hanging out there for about 18 years to put police services into the Beat 6 area. So at some point, we're going to have to negotiate possibly a new master tax exchange agreement with the county, which may relieve some of that or drive up costs, depending on how those negotiations were to go. So, you know, I just...
Yeah, that's very true.
And looking at a number of other things that we spend money on, like fire services and everything else in the service area G, we may have to either get them to pony up the deficit on that, or just simply, you know, cut that and turn it back to the county. So, I mean, there's some area for movement that may help us on that Beat 6 piece.
The net cost for services, when you look at the transfer of property tax dollars and sales tax dollars to the city versus the net cost of staffing that beat, we calculated that at about $300,000 based upon the existing master tax exchange agreement.
Assuming the annexation goes through.
Yes.
Right. But that's, you know, you raise important points that if it doesn't go through, that you have a significant portion of the city that's covered by sheriff services.
Right.
We need to transition that to police services.
Oh, and we owed that, you know, we thought in the beginning it was going to be just a short period of time, 3 years. And I'm sure Mark remembers those discussions as we tried to move through, you know, some of those times. And here it's languished out there far too long. And we certainly owe that area something, so we need to look at what those costs are going to be. But thank you.
Mm-hmm. Construction of park facilities in the Tierra Buena area. The CIP budget includes a total of $800,000 in carryover funding for construction of harder park Parkway Park and Bike Path using grant funds, applied for but not yet awarded, and development impact fees. Along with economic development initiatives, provided funding for the T-bid formation, and we currently allocate 1% of our 10% TOT for ongoing support of the Yuba Sutter Lodging Association. And our TOT tax has increased compared to the prior year, so we increased the 1% allocation as well in this proposed budget. I showed you this last year, and I think it's important to bring it forward again just as a reminder, because when I talk about capital acquisition purchases for the vehicle replacement fund, this is very applicable. We set aside $800,000 per year in the general fund, and we have for the last, this is the third year, fiscal year 17, 18, and 19, but we've evaluated it at the staff level, and what we really need to set aside is $1,125,000 in funding, so we're short about $325,000 each year from what we think we need to set aside. We did not build that into this budget. It would have taken all of the surplus away had we. But when I talk about vehicle purchases, you'll see why that's so important and why I want to remind you about that. Our largest revenue changes continue to be our top two here, sales tax and property tax. Property taxes are projected to increase by 4.3% next fiscal year, which is expected to generate an additional $621,400. Of that, a portion of the increase will actually come from this fiscal year because we're receiving more than what we anticipated by about $169,000, but the total change from one year to the next is about $621,000. Sales tax continues to do well. We projected a 3% increase in sales tax revenues, which is generating the additional sum of money. I will show you an additional slide that shows you what some of the historical data on sales tax has been. Hotel motel surcharge revenues, we budgeted for only a 2% increase over the amount expected to be received in fiscal year 18 because we're really bringing in larger hotel motel surcharge revenues than what we had projected in the current year. I don't think they're going to keep sustaining like they have as far as the larger increases. We'll see when we get some new hotels built in town. I think we'll see some folks shifting maybe from some existing to the new ones. And certainly at that point, I will project some higher increases in the hotel motel surcharge tax.
That's a little conservative. I mean, it's 200 rooms. I think it's probably way too early to call it, but I mean, this seems just conservative.
Yeah, that is not built into this because...
No, I realize that,
yeah.
but the notion that we're going to shift from one to
Some will
another.
shift. No, but what I'm saying is once those are constructed, I will be showing larger increases than 2%.
Robin,
Mm-hmm.
question, my name's Dale Eiler, Planning Commission, and the sales taxes, is that across the board sales tax increases, or is that in a couple of different industries? Whereabouts do we see that?
It's across the board, but a lot of where we're seeing it is in general consumer goods and automobile sales. Autos have performed really, really well. That makes me very nervous because I know it can't continue indefinitely.
And that's continuing to expand in terms of
The dealerships,
yeah,
yes.
the dealerships are increasing in size.
They are.
Okay.
And that has what's been really driving our sales tax. We've been doing well across the board, but those are definitely a driving force.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Building permits, we're also projecting an increase in those revenues along with franchise fees, CSAG, and business licenses. Go ahead, Darren. Some other revenues that are up as well are real property transfer tax because people are buying and selling real estate and we get a small portion of that for every transaction. State other revenues are development related fees, GIS, and encroachment permits. And this is where you can see a big revenue reduction that I mentioned for the SAFER grant. We only have it in this year's budget for fiscal year 18-19 for 5 pay periods, so it causes a reduction in revenues, $717,700. Recreation programs, I put a note here, expense reduced too. This is for the after-school programs. The school district took over those programs. The city is no longer providing them. So it was a net zero loss to the city because we're not getting the revenues, but we're also not incurring the expense for it. And your total net increase in revenues of $832,000. Any questions before I move on? This shows you in more detail the history of the city's sales tax revenues, 10 years of actual data with the current year projected and next year's proposed. You can see that this is an all-time high for us. This appears to be higher, but that's where the state ended the triple flip and we received additional monies for just that 1 year period. This does not include the net amount that's taken out in the proposed budget that you see in front of you for the master tax exchange agreement to Sutter County. We netted out of the budget. It's expected to be about $460,000 next fiscal year, but I like to show you our total gross sales and show you that they're hitting just under 14 million, which is an all-time high for us here in Yuba City. Our most recent 4 quarters of data, the third quarter, 16-17 was somewhat dismal when I had a projection of I think 3.25 in that year's budget. But then we rebounded and had 3.3. The first quarter of 17-18, which would be July, August, and September, 9.4, followed by a 5, giving us an average increase for the most recent 4 quarters of 4.6. And I'm projecting 3% next fiscal year. And I'm frankly a little more optimistic than the city sales tax consultants. I usually am, but that's what I've seen the trends be. So I hope I'm not back in front of council giving you my mid-year report and saying we did not meet that. I certainly hope I'm back before you telling you we've exceeded it. That said, I'm expecting about $164,000 in additional sales tax revenues in the current fiscal year, and the rest will be reflected as additional revenues in next year's budget. Our property taxes have also rebounded very well. 10 years of actual data, projected and proposed budget. I've included a 4.3% increase in this year's proposed budget for property taxes. That would include new construction being added to the rolls, along with the sales prices of homes going up and the 2% CPI that the state allows for. I expect we'll be seeing that 2% this next year. So 4.3% is factored into the budget. Sales tax and property tax make up 64% of our general fund revenues. So they are the lion's share of our revenues.
Robin, I would just like to make a statement on this, and that previous slide kind of shows how important it is to take empty land within Yuba City, especially the core areas and stuff, and actually get improvements on them. Because, you know, land that is bare is only worth a certain amount of money, very little taxes, property tax. But as soon as you put some improvements on it, it significantly increases the value, so the property tax. So getting these lots and things filled in with new businesses, improved improvements, how effective that is at actually bringing revenue into the city and not having to spread out and go farther where infrastructure isn't there yet. So the expense of putting it there sometimes actually outweighs the value of the to the budget, outweighs the value of actually developing when needing to provide services. So that is why I think I know I have focused on trying to develop the land with empty lots so that we can maximize our revenue increases without putting more burden on the taxpayers and the citizens. So, and I think everybody around town has noticed significant improvements on that within the core and within the city limits when the infrastructure already is in place. And hopefully we can continue to, as a council, to promote that. And because it's already, infrastructure is already there, it's much better for our revenue increases and stability of the financial portfolio of the city.
Sales tax and property tax are definitely the lion's share of our general fund budget.
So Robin, the other thing in talking to some of the local real estate and looking at the analysis that some of the residential real estate folks do on an ongoing basis is we've been slower to come out of the recession. The Bay Area lit on fire, started to push up property values, especially residential, where we lag behind. So their analysis is actually showing that there's a good tendency for us, should there be a correction, that we're not going to see as much of a correction as what other parts of the state may see. So we wouldn't necessarily take that big dip that we took back in 11, 12, 13, 14.
Right.
That it would be a slighter correction than what we're looking at.
Yeah, I agree with you. That was the housing bubble bursting there.
Right.
I suspect where we would see more of a reduction would be in our sales tax if everybody started slowing their spending, stopped buying newer vehicles and things like that. That would hurt us in our sales tax revenues. These are our largest salary and benefit expenditure changes. And if you think this is a long list, you should see the list that I pulled it from. We go through this in great detail in the finance department and put together. We analyze every change that we make to our salaries and benefits for not just the general fund, but all the city's different funds, and determine what's driving it. So the biggest thing you can see here at the top, I always go in highest to lowest dollar amount, is $927,400. That's our increase in CalPERS retirement costs just for the general fund for next fiscal year. We've known it's coming. Here it is. There are some savings as well. I will show you here shortly when we have employees that go to PEPRA, for example, and a classic employee retires, the cost goes down. But this is the net increase when we went through and incorporated the PERS rates into next fiscal year. Step increases as folks go through the merit increases. Negotiated salary adjustments for contracts that we approved this fiscal year going into next fiscal year. Healthcare, this is a projected increase because we separate fiscal years when we look at healthcare costs. This is an estimated 7% increase for next fiscal year. I'm going to show you a savings here in a minute for last fiscal year because that actually came in less than what we were projecting. And
was it 7? Did you predict 7 the year before also?
yes, we did. Yeah, that's been the average over about a 10-year period. So that's what we typically put into the budget, and then we modify and look at what the savings was, but it ends up being less than that. The annual required contribution for CalPERS for the police portion of PEMCA, and then retiree health care for those that are eligible. Workers' comp increases that are built into the budget for the general fund. And this one somewhat continues on to the next page. I will explain it to you here. This is for the fire department. We transferred firefighter 2s that were part of the SAFER grant. They became permanent employees within the fire department, and then we backfilled and hired employees at fire recruit level. So it created a very large budgetary savings for us. And they were not only at a fire recruit level, but then step 1 typically is their new hires.
Here, Robin, just for us sitting back here on this side of the pool table, on the laser.
Is your pointer bad?
Well, with this new screen, it's reflecting off.
Oh.
And coming this from you.
I'm
right
sorry.
back over
I'll
here.
stop pointing then.
Yeah,
Thank you for telling me.
yeah,
Blinded.
I'm sorry. I wish you would have said something sooner.
Well,
That's over there.
Well, we were going to suffer through it, but when Mark's retina just blew up.
Hey, Devin, the
I'll just
screen's
give
too
you the pointer.
good.
I'll take care
A
of it.
non-reflective
No.
screen.
I'll scratch it up before the next meeting.
Let's not do that. Okay, next slide, please, Daryl. So when I mentioned that continued on to this next slide, we also saved money because we had the Safer Grant employees in the budget for a whole year, and now they're only in there for 5 pay periods. So that causes a reduction in cost of $576,000. So we kind of saved in 2 different ways, if you will. We also saved for backfilling vacancies at a lower step and PEPRA hires. We always budget for vacant positions at mid-range. In all likelihood, they'll be hired at step 1, but occasionally you can find somebody that department head wants to bring in at a higher step. So we always typically fill it in at mid-range. We removed the limited term battalion chief from the budget because we have the assistant chief position budgeted in the budget. And this is where I told you you'd see healthcare again. The fiscal year 17-18 healthcare costs were $105,600 less than what we budgeted. And that was due because we budgeted for a 7% increase, and Blue Shield rates went down 3.6, so that actually triggered real savings as opposed to less of an increase. And then CalPERS rates had a 5% increase. And then other miscellaneous changes, $68,400 in added costs. That was a long list that I wasn't going to bore you all with. But net reduction in cost of $201,000.
Robin, take a moment to explain to the council and everyone here the good news of PEPRA, which is the new pension system. When someone comes in, that you pay at a lower rate for those folks, but how there's the rest of the story.
The rest of the story. What happens, the classic employee typically retires out, so then you're paying an increased unfunded liability the next year to CalPERS because the person retired. CalPERS thought they would work longer and that the city would be paying longer towards the retirement. Once they retire, CalPERS knows they're not going to collect on that through the payroll system anymore, and they've got to pay out benefits to that employee. So your unfunded liability payment goes up the following year. So they get you coming or they get you going. One way or another, you're going to pay CalPERS. That's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Next slide. I really like this new screen. You can even read my small print. These are the changes, personnel changes and reclassifications included in the budget. It includes the old position title and then the new position title or change. The position here that's changing is the Economic Growth and Public Affairs Manager. It's proposed to be changed to add Deputy City Manager to that title. It includes renewing the Finance and Human Resources limited term positions for 1 additional year, as it is proposed currently in the budget. And it removes a building maintenance worker 1-2, deletes the full-time equivalent, and instead includes contract services added to materials, supplies, and services. So you'll see that as an additional cost when I go through our MS and S changes in the budget here next. In addition, it shows deleting the Fire Battalion Chief Training Officer along with the 9 Safer Grant employees. Any questions?
Can we shorten that economic deputy director list that make it a little short got it for?
Well, touching upon that, that's in recognition. Mr. Darren Gale, under that scenario, would continue to provide the economic growth and public affairs. He has done a very good job of picking up extra project responsibilities in the city manager's office, and so that is out of recognition for that. So.
Okay.
This again is a very long list. I'm showing council all the changes over $15,000. I'm only going to talk about the items on this first page because you get into the minutia on the next page. They're in declining dollar value, but some of these are pretty important. The first one is the largest one, $250,000. That's put into the contingency fund at the city as a set aside for negotiations for contracts that we currently don't have settled. We have tentative agreements moving forward and in most cases, but I couldn't allocate the budget dollars in the actual proposed budget because council has not approved the contracts yet. The plan intended there is once the contracts are approved, I will take the money out of the contingency budget and allocate it to the departments where those employees reside. Our vehicle maintenance ISF fund cost went up. Last year we had some fund balance we wanted to draw down. We typically don't keep large balances in our internal service funds unless there's some reason to. So we drew down the balance about $50,000 last year. Plus this year we're fully staffed. So costs that got allocated out to all the departments went up. The custodial cleaning contract cost, that's where I mentioned we had a building maintenance employee that we deleted from the budget, and instead we're using contract services. That's where you're seeing this come back into the budget. It's just a shift from one area of the budget to the other. Planning consulting services, $60,000 for that. Field operations mandated training costs. The police department requested funds to send officers and staff to training. It's mandated by the state. The state has eliminated a lot of the post reimbursements that they've provided to cities and agencies in the past that they're no longer providing. We will put a claim in through our state mandated cost claims reimbursement program. I'm not real optimistic, but we have not included that as a revenue coming back into the city. We need to process that claim and see if we can get the state to pay on it first. The intent is there that we'll finances really get it going after the money. We'll try to get it back into the city's coffers, but in the meantime we need to provide the training to the police officers, so we've added that into the budget. Vehicle fuel cost increases, general fund citywide $50,500. We looked at the average price of fuel. It was from July until February was $2.56 a gallon. We're budgeting $3.10 a gallon for next fiscal year, so that cost has gone up as well.
And we still contract with a specific provider, correct?
We do.
And that's a negotiated price?
It is. And it's based upon, I'm going to say it wrong, Spencer might be able to describe it better.
The rack rate.
Yeah, a rack rate plus a small percentage.
For handling.
What was I? City clerk municipal election costs, because it's an election year. That goes in one year, comes out the next year. When we don't have an election, goes back the following year. $32,000 for parks tree planting. General liability insurance went up. This is the general fund share of that cost allocation. Human resources has had difficulty going, staying within budget for pre-employment testing and psychological exams for all the vacancies that we've had in the city. So they requested some additional funding, as well as did the fire department for recruitment costs, background checks, and physical exams. $25,000 for human resources for negotiations, contract services. That's to wrap up the last round of negotiations and to start the next round of negotiations early next year. So, next page, please. And again, I won't go through all the small items on here. You can kind of see what they are. We've got them detailed out for you because I never want to try to like slip anything past council. I want you to know what's included in the budget. It's kind of across the board, all departments. We kept material supplies and services down so low throughout the recession that I think there's a lot of pent-up demand. Down at the bottom, you see the recreation programs reduced by $130,500. That was the revenue that I showed. We also lost out because we're no longer doing the service, but there was no net impact ultimately to the budget. And then we did go back and remove last year's one-time request where a department told us they needed something, but it was only for a one-year special project or something the department was doing. We took those back out. So the total cost increases included in the proposal just under $883,000. I don't worry as much adding materials, supplies, and services into the budget because if we have an economic downturn, we can go back and scale those back easier than we can salaries and benefits, people and positions.
And that seems like a big number, but your budget of $40 million, that's 2%. So put it in that perspective, you realize it's not exorbitant. So.
I mentioned we had capital acquisition requests for the general fund. These are items where we don't have money already set aside in our technology replacement fund or our computer or our vehicle replacement fund, excuse me. These are items that departments want to buy and don't have funds already set aside for, but we keep them separate because they are expected to last more than a year. They're not an expendable item. So these are the items, personal watercraft for the fire department, portable surveillance system for Public Works Engineering, and a fire training video conferencing system for the fire department. A much longer list here is our capital acquisition request for vehicles. You can see that they're also listed whether it's a new addition or a replacement. I won't read through the list, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you've got questions. These are also included on page 125 of your budget. And I know all the department heads are here too and can speak to the request. If you have questions, I can answer.
So for Diana, the truck mounted asphalt paver, that's the pothole
Correct.
fixer
Yeah,
that
correct.
can't wait.
I know.
Is that the one that goes down there, pulls it out, and puts it all in, and that one we watched, or what?
So it's one that we went and shadowed not only a contractor but another agency.
Right.
And it comes highly recommended. It will reduce the amount of people required to deal with potholes on a permanent basis, and it will improve our efficiency.
So, if you don't mind, it would be nice to have Diana point out anything else on this list. And I say that because Public Works has had a huge focus on innovation and identifying ways to do things differently.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that jumps out?
Yeah, the Pipe Hunter Sidekick Easement Jetter. That sounds really exciting. What it is it allows us to, with our jet, so the big truck jet that we have that goes around town, if you can imagine when you have backlot sewer mains, it's really hard and it's a lot of physical labor to pull the hoses back there to jet the line. With this easement jetter, it's a small addition to the jet truck that's it's more mobile to take into backyards to be able to jet those backlot lines. And so jetting backlot lines actually means to clean them with a high pressure hose and head.
Thank you.
These are all of the requests for technology. Frankly, when I saw Devin's, this is a very long list. And it shows that they're all replacements of currently existing items that we have that we've been utilizing, but we're getting more innovative, I think, too, with what we're replacing and what we're moving to for our platforms for innovation. Do you have any questions regarding any of these? And lastly, this is the list for the request from utilities.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
You have Airboard listed twice for 7,500. Is that two different people, Diana? And it says wastewater collections.
Yeah, it's just one air board.
So there
But
was
it's-
something on.
But it's listed in two different.
Go back
They
to
have
it.
Yeah, the previous. I did have the arrow
One more.
board on it. One more.
I caught that. I was waiting.
Yeah, see the Airboard.
This is
I
Airboard
do see that.
number 14, and then you listed it again. So we're not.
Okay, so we
there
listed
wasn't-
it as.
Okay, so
we
the
listed
wastewater
it
plant
as-
didn't need one. The wastewater plant didn't need
Yeah.
one. Okay. So is that $7,500 savings?
We'll double check, but I doubt it. I think instead we probably hit and got it
Okay,
on
all
two
right.
lists.
No problem.
But we will double check just in case.
Hey, we'll have $7,500 savings.
So total citywide request for capital acquisition items, just under $2 million, but a lot of it is vehicles. 1.232 million, if I remember correctly, was vehicles. Replacing a lot of vehicles. We've held off a lot on replacing vehicles for as long as possible. And a lot of the vehicles we're looking at replacing are for the police department and frontline law enforcement vehicles. I'll preface this slide by saying I know that this is a very ugly chart. We have gone through and calculated our total PERS cost from the actuarial reports by looking at how much we have to contribute as a percentage of our payroll for each of our tiers within CalPERS. And then in addition to that, how much they want us to send them for their unfunded actuarial liability, our UAL payment. We make our UAL payments upfront every year in July so we can deduct the interest that they would otherwise charge and save the city money. But we take that and we develop a composite rate to determine exactly for each year of payroll what is the estimated rate that we're gonna have to contribute to CalPERS? And that's what it looks like, with the red line being safety and the blue line being miscellaneous. Those are the projected increases based upon the June 2016 actuarial reports that CalPERS issued last August. And that's our composite rate, all-in cost, if you will. And it doesn't include the portion that employees are paying 7% for the PEPRA or 8% for classic, 9% for safety. This is just the city's anticipated share.
I like to know in 2023 how we're gonna pay 130%. When you're 30, I added that up. How do you pay
That's
130%?
So-
That's not-
Yeah, it'd be a separate dollar. So if you're
Yeah.
a public safety employee, that would be a different dollar than miscellaneous employee.
Right, but still, but
So-
still coming from us 130%.
Well, no, yeah, it would be for the $2 you just paid, it would be $1.30.
Yeah.
So not, but yeah, if you average them out, it would be.
Yeah, if you average them about 65 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
So you end up with I'll call it a shadow workforce, meaning that for every dollar you're paying out, you got 3/4 of it that you're paying to the PERS system, which is, if we had hindsight being 2020, this wouldn't be where all of California's jurisdictions are today, but this is where we are. So it's a matter of working with the other regional jurisdictions, actually statewide, I should say, on where we go from here. The city managers group is working on solutions, although it's going to take a lot of, frankly, I think it's going to take cities reaching the point of severe fiscal stress to cause change. Once again, I'll go back to us saying at the beginning that we're extremely fiscally conservative. So there will be other cities that will experience that far before we do. So.
And our.
Yeah, no, I think these next couple of years are going to be a telling time, and so, yeah.
Just, Robert, on those numbers at the beginning, 30.5, 37.6% of what?
Of every dollar of payroll, of regular wages that are payable.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, it doesn't include any overtime, but regular wages, specialty pays that people get that fold into PERS retirement calculations.
So we pay the salary and then we take the 30.5% for miscellaneous employee and pay that to PERS.
This is all due to the devaluing down eventually to the 7%.
Yes.
And they're actually talking
That
lower.
and when they lost 30% of their
Correct.
portfolio.
Yeah, the
So-
original unfunded occurrence. Yeah.
Totally mismanaged.
And I know this is really busy, but what I'm trying to show you here is that things change over time with CalPERS. The purple line was based upon projections from the 2014 actuarial reports. The blue line was based upon the 2015 actuarial reports. The green line is the most recent, the 2016 actuarial reports. So the green line you can see is a little better than the blue line that we had before based upon the 2015 data. So that gives me some comfort, but not really enough because we're still going from $6.5 million in fiscal year 16 projected up to $11.5 million in fiscal year 23.
And that green line represents a smoothing formula that they put out over a period of time?
It does.
And what's that period of time?
It's 2 years before you start getting hit with the increases and then a phase in for 3 years. So beyond this, we'll have a couple more years of increase. In that, they have told us that we will see some slight reduction and benefit because of the 11.2% investment earning that they attained last year. But it's going to keep going up, we know that, even beyond this. I'm prepared for that. I'm looking forward to getting the actuarial reports in July or August of this coming year and crunching these numbers again. But I like to hold myself accountable and show you what I've shown you before so that if I'm saying the numbers have changed, I'm kind of telling you why. It's based upon the latest and greatest information we currently have from CalPERS. How good is it? It's straight out of the actuarial reports. So. Go ahead, Carol. Oh, you did. This shows you the 10-year expense growth by category. It changes fairly significantly every year. I compared fiscal year 09 actual with what we budgeted for fiscal year 19. The takeaway from this slide is on a compounded basis, our expenditures have gone up 1.3% per year. Revenues have only gone up 1% per year. So it kind of shows you why we've struggled to balance our budgets and why we prioritize so very carefully. We have a lot more needs and requests than what we can actually fund. This is our fiscal year 17-18. I call it surplus policy discussions because I'm going to be asking you for some policy direction at the end of this. Projected revenues at the end of this fiscal year are going to be $43 million. We have grants included that will either be spent or carried over, so I have to deduct those because we haven't incurred all the expense associated with them yet, along with projected expenditures of $40.1 million, leaving a projected surplus of $2.3 million. From that surplus, the very first thing we do is, as our budget goes up, we have to set aside 15% for our Healthy Cities Reserve. That's $113,600. Council in the previous 2 fiscal years has advanced development impact fee to pay off loans to fire and police for overdrawing those accounts to make facility improvements from developer impact fees over the prior 2 years. This assumes we would do the same thing again this year. This would be year 3 of a 10-year advanced loan repayment, with the assumption that when development picks up, that would eventually get repaid by developer impact fees. And then I mentioned before, we don't set aside enough, or have not, for our vehicle purchases. For the police vehicles that we've included in the budget, in order to fund all of those vehicle purchases, we're short by $384,500 in the vehicle replacement fund. So I'm asking council to consider allowing me to include in the budget resolution, setting aside part of this year's surplus to fund the rest of those vehicle purchases. The reason we're short is 2 reasons. One, because we've been setting aside $800,000 when we need to set aside about $325,000 more per year than what we have been. And 2, because we started buying SUV vehicles instead of the sedans that we used to buy that were a lot less expensive, frankly. I know everyone in the state seems to be moving to the SUVs, so we're not alone in that, but they are more expensive, so we're having to set aside more dollars for them.
And just a question for Rob. Rob, there's not really a sedan left in the police market, is there?
Charged, but and Yuba County's pretty much going away from that also because the issues they've been having with it. There's not a lot of room in those cars, and that's exactly why they've gone away towards SUVs. So we piggyback off CHP because CHP uses SUVs now.
So if we do those 3 things listed, then we would have available for one-time purposes left over out of this year's surplus, if you will, about $1.4 million. And what I'm proposing to City Council is we do the same thing with it that we did last year. We changed our year-end fiscal policy. We used to take anything that was left and set it aside for general fund infrastructure items. Last year we said, no, we're going to split it. We're going to take half and put it towards this pension stabilization trust, and the other half will go towards the general fund infrastructure needs. So that's what I'm recommending that we do again this year.
Could I ask, could you give me a short list of the unallocated general CIP for projects? Anything specific in there that this would be going towards? Just kind of name a couple of specific.
This would go towards funds that we would be allocating in fiscal year 19-20. It would set funds aside available for that. I'll show you the reserves in just a moment of what we have in the general fund. And then we'll talk about CIP, and I can go through with you kind of what we had in the way of requests for general fund that we couldn't fund everything. We got 1.8 million in requests, and we only allocated 300,000 for our general CIP budget. So there's a huge need for more funding there.
So this would increase the CIP budget to help out them on that?
It would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And on to general fund reserves. If we do the things we talked about, and if council's comfortable with those policy discussion items I showed you on that last slide, then what we would have left in the general fund at the end of the current fiscal year after making those transfers would be $6.315 million, plus our one-time money designation. We set aside money several years ago and said, this is one-time money, we will use it for one-time expenditures, which would leave us a total of $6.63 million expected available in the general fund at the end of this fiscal year going into next fiscal year.
Is that an increase or decrease from last year?
It's an increase by the 15%, because I'm proposing that we take the excess beyond that and split it between the pension stabilization trust
Correct.
and the general infrastructure fund. We also have the city's pension stabilization trust, and I like to tell you at least a couple of times a year what the status of that is. We put $2 million into it as our initial contribution back in 2016 from the former Economic Stabilization Reserve Fund. We added $326,000 from our fiscal year 17 surplus. We've had investment earnings of about $130,000, and I'm projecting $703,500 coming from the surplus from the current year if council goes with my recommendation, which would bring our available projected reserve fund balance to $3,159,000. We've put money into that fund. We have not yet taken any money out of that fund. The intent is to have that fund available and to pay down future years' increases with CalPERS if we get to a point where we have a recessionary environment and the economy changes on us and we need to pull funds from this reserve fund, we can to pay CalPERS.
So for the public understanding, why are we doing it this way with pension stabilization trust instead of just paying it down directly to CalPERS each year?
It's a really good question.
Is it basically we actually have more control and the interest comes to us, we have a better, in other words, we're not relinquishing some control over some of the funding, is that pretty much what it is?
Plus, we can leverage it in with CalPERS, say at $500,000 per year or something like that, as opposed to giving CalPERS a bunch of money, and then if they have investment losses, we just vaporize city money.
And so basically, we have flexibility to keep us from going into a budgetary crisis.
Yes.
And this is the way we keep that from happening to us.
This will definitely help in the future.
Yeah, that'll help.
Yes.
Okay.
The general CIP reserve funds, we have currently $4.75 million available, but of that, $3,564,000 is already allocated to projects. Council has allocated that in prior years. We have $356,000 designated for debt service, meaning we've built projects and we owe somebody else money. So Robin has said, let's set this aside because we have to come up with it later and we may not have it later. So we've proposed only $300,200 of projects that we've put into the proposed CIP budget for next year. We had $1.8 million in requests. There was a lot more need than what we have available funding for. And the projects were not frivolous or anything like that. They're high priority projects, but we just don't have the money to do them. We reprioritized a couple of existing projects that we had and reallocated those dollars. So I think in total we allocated about $432,000 to current general fund CIP projects in the proposed CIP budget. But there just really is not enough money to go around. And when Steve and I sat down to talk about these, I recommended to him that we leave $500,000 available as unallocated in this fund for emergency purposes. If we have something catastrophic happen to one of our facilities, we don't want to leave ourselves tapped out in this fund that we use for infrastructure and not have anything available to take care of whatever the need is. So by taking the budget policy as I recommended it with this year's surplus, which is vacancy savings, we could put it aside and half of it into this, which would help replenish this fund for next year's budget cycle and put some money aside in it to fund projects, because there's definitely a lot of need there and requests coming from the departments for it.
And you're talking about some catastrophic type situations, theoretical, but we do have that 15% reserve put into the general to available under catastrophic conditions, to where, you know, you don't have the money allocated out of a budget, but there is that reserve for that emergency purpose or extreme emergency purposes. So it's not like, you know, we're
That's true.
lost, we don't have it. I mean, you know, we're not going to be able to
That's
do it. It's there if that's absolutely necessary. So we're planning in many different ways contingencies.
We are.
And for the whole city, but putting money into these little categories, sometimes you're putting a risk of having to move it from here to here to here, and there's a big process a lot of the time, and regulations on how to do that. So
It
the
takes,
general fund reserve accomplishes more flexible process.
it definitely does within the general fund. And I don't move money from any of these. Each bucket is separate and has a separate
Correct.
intended purpose. I have to come to council and get your authority to do that.
Correct.
So it's council's discretion that allows us as staff to be able to do that.
I mean, catastrophic is it could be catastrophic.
Oh,
But
so-
it could be this last year, or the last year and a half ago, down at Blackburn Tally, where one of our light standards drops.
And that's kind of catastrophic
You know, so-
I'm talking about.
Well, it's not necessarily catastrophic,
Yeah,
but it's
it's
like,
just
oh my
like
gosh, you know, a
big
light
surprise.
standard. And that project
Big surprise.
was,
$260,000.
how much?
260.
260.
Yeah.
And that's not even complete yet. We still have another phase of that to go. So that'll eat up.
So catastrophic may not be the correct word to use.
Let's say a word, but
It's just,
there's a spectrum.
It's just a surprise, unexpected, that has to be taken care of.
Sure. Yeah.
And so,
I'm almost to the end where we can take a break before we get into the CIP. I sense that folks are needing a break. The vehicle replacement fund is another place that I like to tell council what our reserves are. These are truly earmarked for each and every separate vehicle within the city's general fund. Finance, because we like spreadsheets, tracks them and keeps a balance by vehicle, so we can tell the departments how much they have saved for the replacement of each and every vehicle within their fleet. But that said, we are projected to have about just under 7.7 million as of July 1st. We are contributing $800,000 from this year's fiscal year 18-19 budget, and we're making purchases of general fund items of $941,000, leaving about $7.5 million anticipated as of June 30th of 19. And that does anticipate council giving me the authority to transfer that $384,500 to completely fund the police department purchases that are included in the proposed budget for fiscal year 19. And lastly, the green lines are, of course, your revenues, and the red lines are your expenditures. The solid lines are historical that have already happened, and the dashed lines are projected, whether it's the projected fiscal year 18 still happening, proposed 19 and going forward, with the current projected PERS increases included in this. You can see that we do get back to a deficit budget situation in fiscal year 21 because of CalPERS, and this includes additional CalPERS increases for the general fund. This is just the general fund. I'm projecting $923,300 in fiscal year 21, $808,000 in 22, and $701,000 in fiscal year 23. So our fiscal stability, we will be monitoring and managing our budget each and every year and very carefully evaluating all the proposed expenditures coming in as requests and what ultimately gets before you in a proposed budget to try to balance those needs out, the needs of the department to provide services along with the city's need for fiscal sustainability and a healthy fiscal situation with our budget. And it is most definitely a balancing act. So, with that, I'll answer any questions.
one thing that I've learned about you and your projections, that your conservative level paints a relatively very close to the wire picture, because you don't want to make a misstep on projections and end up short. And I've learned that about you, that we have done better than what you've projected each of the years that we've been here. And So that green line to me, if it follows the trend, will be above the red line based upon your being so conservative that it's almost, I don't want to use the word misleading, but almost, you're just being so cautious. You just don't want us to end up being in that situation. So
I won't disagree with you,
I
but
know
I
how
will tell you that
conservative.
this does not factor in a recession.
correct.
So, Terrell, if you go back to that other slide, because if you showed this very same slide a few years back, and I'm talking in 12,
Yeah.
we were still looking at a deficit in 13, 14, 15, 16, and things shifted, and a more conservative approach was taken, but also there's been an increase in revenues in
Absolutely.
Yuba City from business and other.
Sales tax particularly.
Sales taxes has gone up and property taxes slowly increased. So, as we continue to build a new economy here or add to the economy, those numbers on the outside in 20, 21, 22 can shift out.
They could,
So-
absolutely. And I
So
hope.
And
I
don't
hope they
ever use the R word again.
Do you like economic downturn better?
That's far better than recession.
How does council feel about the policy items? Is that okay with you for me to bring forward as part of the proposed budget package? If so, I will.
Solid conservative approach.
Okay, thank you.
We have to take that extra money, go to Reno and put it on red.
I never bet on red. I don't like
okay,
red.
all right.
I like green.
Okay.
With that, do you want to take a little break for a few
Yeah,
minutes before we do
So-
CIP? And-
Mayor, let me just say, so Robin's not leaving me from this meeting, but I just want to recognize that Robin just gave you the tip of the iceberg. And trust me, she knows the iceberg beneath the water. She's been with us for going on 20 years. She's a CPA. We have the behind the scenes workers. We have Spencer Morrison, Lynn, and Carly, who have worked countless hours. If you're wondering why cars are in the parking lot, besides Arnaldo's out front. Okay. Yeah, that is not a city vehicle parked out front. That's Arnaldo's truck. We're trying to get him to go home more often. But that said, the finance crew's been here working hard for months on this to put this together. So I just want to take a moment to say thank you. So,
Thank you,
all right.
Steve. And I agree, we have a very small and mighty team. Awesome employees.
Thank you, everyone.
So Mary, you said you want to take 5 minutes?
Yeah, let's take a 5-minute
Okay.
break.
And there's food for everyone. Anyone who would like to indulge, please.
All right, I'll return this to you. And I'll-
All right, good evening, everybody. For those who don't know me, my name is Ben Moody. I'm the Deputy Public Works Director for Yuba City, overseeing the engineering department. And I'd like to say I have one of the best jobs here at Yuba City, being able to spend all this money that you put in the capital improvement program to build projects for the community. And so I'll get into it. The goal today with this presentation is basically kind of a overview of the priority projects that we're working on through 18-19, with some recent focus at the past council priority goal and workshop in March and a recent staff report about the wastewater. I'm kind of doing a general overview. The idea is it's kind of interactive and ask me questions along the way. And I'm going to focus on the streets, water, and sewer budgets. So with that, there's just a quick kind of visual. I got an old school map up here to the right that kind of shows the city overall. At the engineering department, we always struggle with presentations because the city is when you do a map, it's tall and narrow, and the screens are always wide screens. So I've split here on the screen in the north and half here, and it's just kind of the intent with the map is just to show with this capital improvement program budget that shows the different affected areas. So you can see the different, the blue and the different markings on the streets. It shows all of the different areas that we have projects programmed to take place. And some of these, and as I go through them, I'll highlight these. We'll talk about them, and I can come back and show you on the map where they're at.
So Ben, all of them have little guys digging, but except for one's got a Christmas tree on it. What's the Christmas tree one?
That's when it's going to get
On the
done.
previous screen. On the previous screen. Yeah.
Oh, that's the park.
Oh, it's a park.
It's the park.
Okay.
It's a Google map. So
All right.
we got a couple.
And the duck is something too. Right?
You know, and that comes from our George Barlow, our analyst. In this map, actually, he keeps it updated at active projects on the city's website, and so it has some information on there that he turns layers on and off about active projects and development that's occurring in the city. So it has a little Yuba City logo in there that's carried over. So with that, to kick things off, I'm going to go into the streets and roads CIP. Here's just a few pictures here of the recent work that was completed last year regarding streets and roads. This year, the budget, the CIP budget, is basically approximately $2.6 million in 1819. Yeah, pretty average standard budget. You know, it's not bringing in a lot of grant dollars. It's kind of our base dollar amount. Current priority projects that we're focusing on are, number one, as everybody knows, is the Fifth Street Bridge replacement project. When Robin showed that number earlier on in her presentation, the $142 million, and Steve talked about a big chunk of that being Fifth Street Bridge, that's the $73 million right there showing that. There's also some other funds later on with the cellular water meter project with the $8 million grant and financing and different bonds that artificially inflates the number from year to year, back and forth, depending on how the funding comes in. So with Fifth Street Bridge replacement project, currently people haven't been out for a tour. We'd be happy to take people out on tours now. At the beginning of each month, we've dedicated a day to take staff and the public out there and show them the current status. Right now, the big push with the bridge is that they're going to be doing the trestle work. They're going to be entering the river. They're going to start putting in about 250 piles to enter into the waterway and start doing the false bridge to build the new bridge. And so that's going to be really active in the beginning of June. And then you'll start to see some improvements along the Bridge Street along the front of the businesses over the next few months.
Ben?
Yep.
For that 1.3 on Tully Parkway, Queens Avenue, does that include Tully Parkway and Queens Avenue? And if it does include Tully, how far north?
So this portion of Tully Parkway, look at that pointer.
No, you don't want to use the pointer.
Well, I was going to do it on this map.
Oh, yeah.
We'll do it on the old school one. So you can't see it real well, but really, yeah. Right. You like that?
That pops.
This guy working is covering it here in the kind of northwest segment there, but it really just goes up to the Queens
Where Queens?
Queens teams in there.
Okay, all right.
And so, any questions about the Fifth Street Bridge? All right, with the Bridge Street widening, this has been identified as a priority project by the council, and staff has been working diligently over the last year or so to acquire the properties and demolish the properties as they become available. Currently, we have 3 more to be demolished out to bid, with one house left to purchase that we're working through.
Hey, Ben, have we engaged in any eminent domain on any of those properties?
We have not, and we have not had to at this point, and we're hoping to move forward without that.
And while you got the bid, we were discussing, or there was talk a little earlier, were we thinking about just going all the way to 99? I know it's like an extra $4 million in budget, just try going all the way to 99 instead of stopping at Gray.
It's been identified as a future phase. Currently, right now, 99 is actually a 2-lane road in each direction, and so the pinch point is really to make a 4-lane road is that Gray to Cooper.
Okay.
But we have talked about beautifying that to the west, and we're looking to implement some of those enhancements as development occurs, like the Carriage Square and other improvements happen.
Okay. Thank you, Ben.
So Bridge Street widening, and so current status is we're about 75% done with the plans. We're working to finalize the properties, purchase of the properties and clear them. We've put out an environmental RFP to get the environmental work process started, and we're actively trying to find money for that project. It's a big project, $8 million, and so we really we just put in for a Tiger grant recently, and we're looking to put in for an ATP grant. So we're trying to find anything available in this region for funding that.
The new term is built.
Bill, it is.
It's the build grant. So.
Yeah. And so the next project is Franklin Avenue Pedestrian Improvement Project. This was a partially passed grant that we received for the bike lanes and the sidewalks. And on this budget, we've included some SB1 dollars, about $300,000 and change, to come into the project to improve the road while we do that. Since we're in there doing the curb together sidewalks, we want to enhance the road because it's in pretty bad shape while we're in there. We're looking to finalize that design and get it going this year.
Was the county going to help kick in on the south side?
So there's been some discussions and some early commitments about that area on the south that's partially in the county that they're willing to participate with us for their share.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Sanborn Road improvements, it's similar. It's a county-city project where the city's taking the lead to get basically improve the drainage down there and the pedestrian access for bikes. And the road's in bad shape too. And that's a segment that really you could spend a lot of money down there because of the poor state of the road, but it's at an area that maybe is not necessarily as highly used as other portions. So we've talked about phasing it and then also partnering with the county to try to get them to put in their share with it.
Just a comment on that. There's a lot of pedestrians that use that, so not necessarily the street,
Very.
but very, very high.
Very high to the church.
Pedestrian traffic, they're very.
So it does get dangerous for them when they're riding their bikes.
And that's why the delineators are there right now, to keep people from having problems.
On Franklin and then also on Sanborn, these high pedestrian
On both,
uses.
yeah. Sanborn also.
And so we're looking to get both of those projects that are actively on design with a strong push to get them out and finished. Tully Parkway at Queens Avenue, this project's been in the works for a little while. We've relatively recently purchased that home a while back, and we're pushing to relocate utilities with that. There's some power poles that have to be moved, and we're disconnecting services and starting to work, determine how we're going to figure out the design and move forward with that project. Road maintenance, this was a highlight here, this $948,000. What I wanted to bring that up with is that basically that's carryover money from last year that we have sitting in the bank. And Steve mentioned earlier we spent about $1.5 million a year. So this year the way we had funding previously allocated, we actually didn't put any money into the road maintenance, and it was just 1 million, 1.1 that came in through SB1. So technically this year we have 948,000 from carryover money, and then the 1.1 sitting in SB1 that's come in. So we're actually a little bit short on the 1.5 this year that we're spending on roads. Any questions on streets and roads?
I have a real quick one on, we had the plan before us just recently, the council, and then not only is the Franklin pedestrian improvements going to be that there was a complete overlay that was going to be from there to, was it Percy? From the SB1 funding for paving on Franklin?
So on the SB1 funds, they require that you, they want to audit, keep track of where the money is. So you develop a list. You're not restricted to put that list, so we prioritized some roadways that need them. However, our top one was Bridge Street, where we have an $8 million bill, but we're only getting 1.1 a year. We established a list quite a ways down, more money than we're getting, and so the goal is to get there and put it there. But right now, it's not a funded project.
Yeah, Bridge Street is definitely not funded.
Ben, first let me say I'm definitely going to be looking at taking that opportunity for the tour with the bridge stuff, because I got a lot of folks who are asking me to get out there for that anyway. Second, I want to say thank you on the Franklin project, because now that I have to walk everywhere that I go, since the stroke I don't drive, I walk up and down through there from my house, which is not far from there, to Circle K almost every day. And let me tell you what, I'm one of those people, I know, because I worked in community development, I know the vehicle code for pedestrians and bicycles. And so I know not to just go across the street in the middle of wherever I feel like it, because I'm an idiot and will get hit by a car. But even when I use the spaces I'm supposed to use, like now those delineators, I love those because this feels a lot safer. It's still dangerous up there if you're walking, because people will, if traffic backs up a little bit at 99, they will start popping off under that shoulder and get in that bike lane and coming around. I almost had a guy hit me one day because he just wasn't paying attention. Luckily, I was paying attention and got out of the way. So I really appreciate the fact that you guys are doing that project. That's going to make a big difference in that area, because we have a lot of pedestrians in that area as well.
Definitely. All right, with that, we'll move into the water CIP. We have a nice area. I can't believe how clear that shows up. But yeah. It's a little bit old. Current model, the current picture, it has solar panels up in that northeast pond that has water now, but it was definitely a crisp picture. So the 1819 priority projects for water, one of the big projects that we're wrapping up is this water system master plan model and update. To me, it's a really important project and a big project, because it sets the foundation for the rates that Diana's going to talk to you about a little bit later, and it really tries to establish a realistic schedule of needs and growth expectations, where our in a working model for as development occurs, that we have something to rely on as a basis to plan on. And it was time for it to be updated. The original plan, I believe, is 2005, 2007? That was an update to the previous plan, which really had different growth projections from that time and era. It was a really different animal, and it could send without correction, it could send us up into a different trajectory than maybe we want to be. So we're wrapping that up. The pressure surge relief facility. This is a fancy word for a hydro tank. So basically, the city's water treatment plant experiences power outages. These instantaneous power outages, which throws the system where our system is pressurized by pumps. But when we have those outages, where there's a split second between the generators kicking on and the power coming back on, it has huge pressure swings in the system, which has a hammering effect that causes the leaks and the water loss and different things. And so one of the priorities is to get a project. There's we're working through a few different options that involve pressure tanks, huge, multiple hydromatic pressure tanks, or flywheels, or battery backup systems, and combinations thereof. And so we're looking at those options as the long-term best benefit for the city. The cellular water meter replacement, this is a really big project for the city. This recently came before council. It talked about a $4 million forgiveness and then a $4 million of that as a low-interest loan. And it's really, to me, we have a lot of meters that are dying in the city that need to be replaced, and it's an opportunity to put those in at a lower cost and to give the citizens basically more benefit, where they're going to be able to capture those resources now, where you have that instant, daily readouts on what their water use is, and additional tools to manage. The Berry School water transmission line, this has been dragging on for a little while, that we want to really get off the books. Currently with the school district and the state, we're about 75% plans, with the plans being going through one of the final drafts that we'll submit to the county and the state for review, and the school district. We're working through finalizing this. We did an environmental process, and the state's doing their own independent environmental review process that they're finalizing. Once the plans are complete, we're hoping here in the next few months that we submit those and finalize the grant application and then move forward with that project.
Ben, does that mean we gotta match it? So if they give us 800,000, we have to match it, or is this gonna be costing us anything, or?
So what we've been told is that it's fully reimbursable, and it's the state's.
So we're just kind of putting money out and hoping we're gonna get it back?
We're not going to put out the construction until we have a firm agreement in place that states that.
That the money's gonna get, they're gonna give us money? Okay. And it's 1.6 for a 3-inch line from Stewart to Berry?
Well, if you look over here,
Uh-huh.
if this green light doesn't blind
Oh,
you.
you're going the other way too. Okay.
If when you come down Railroad and Stewart, so those are full 14-inch and 12-inch lines, and then when you get to the corner of Railroad and Stewart, it would turn into a service lateral that's a 3-inch.
Right. Okay.
Just one question, is that in anticipation of annexation, or why are we doing work down in Berry area?
So this is fully for the benefit of Berry School and the school district. They've had water quality issues, and they're out of compliance. And so the state has come in and basically told them that they need to come up with a plan to fix their water issues. And they had a study conducted, and different drilling additional wells, on-site water treatment, and the long-term solution was to connect the city water.
That's not a county issue?
Yeah, it's a county issue, they just can't solve it.
Exactly. So the city is the one with the water, and so as the consolidating, they would have to join the city water.
Okay. I was just.
So we become the project lead.
Okay.
So Ben, that's a very good question. So what enables us to serve them being out of the sphere of influence? Because we serve Franklin School outside of the sphere, and them outside of the sphere, and there was a special exception to that, as I recall.
So LAFCO, the local agency formation commission, has some guidelines, and it's very clear that we're not to serve water outside the sphere of influence unless it's for public health and safety. And so we will go to the LAFCO commission and basically ask for permission to serve outside the sphere under those terms for public health and safety.
So currently, Dale, and for the last 3 years, Berry School's been serving water by bottle to all of their students. They can't use any of the service water there.
If I arsenic in their water.
Okay.
The water treatment plant, electrical and instrumentation improvements, and the SCADA master plan, they go hand in hand. For the council members that viewed the wastewater plant recently, and with the wastewater improvement project, a big portion of that work is to upgrade our electrical systems, the programs, the software, to bring it current, and just to get it working efficiently again, because of the age and the mismatch and the time delay.
Definitely.
Any questions on the water?
That $2 million, is that part of the, well, real quick on the SCADA, is that part of the next chapter of upgrading the south plant?
So this
Or
this
that-
has to do with the water.
Okay.
So now.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is water. I'm
So
sorry.
this is water.
Okay, never mind. I'm wrong one. I'm sorry. Now we're in south.
So now we're in wastewater. So we have I just threw up an image of an overall view of the plant. And then a recent picture that we talked about with the headworks and the digesters and the belt press. That's some current projects that recently council approved to put out the bid. So priority projects for the wastewater this year is the big one is the wastewater treatment facility improvements that Mandeep recently took to the council and was fully discussed. We're looking forward to put that out to bid soon with a bid opening projected in July and then come back to you with the terms of the financing and the dollar amounts for consideration soon thereafter. A big project, the next big project is the new outfall and river levee crossing replacement. If you could see over here, this purple line down kind of the southeast, this has been talked about at different times at council and different studies taking place. As part of the permit requirements to meet our permit, and Diana's mentioned, we have to, and currently we have a diffuse, we either could go to the ponds when we discharge the the clean wastewater, it goes to the ponds or we can put it into the river, but you can't put it in the river unless there's a foot of water over the pipe. And that's become a problem ever since the Shanghai Bend turned into somewhat of a channel. So we have to have really high river flows in order to put the diffuser into operation. And so as part of our permit with the state, and correct me if I'm wrong, Diane, is that they've given us a timeline to say, hey, what are you doing to fix that? And so as part of the priority projects, we've identified a new outfall diffuser that comes down and then enters the river into a more stable location. And so the plan is to connect on pretty much the very southeast corner of the city, behind those homes where it crosses the levee now, go back out to Garden Highway, down Garden Highway that's just south of Berry School where the river's closer, and then back over. And so that's right now we've put out a request for proposals for designers, and we're trying to move forward in those next steps to start putting a design together.
Ben, what is the age of the wastewater treatment facility? Most of the larger capital improvements.
It's 64?
Late 60s.
Okay. So, community has gotten a lot of good use out of what's existing, and it's now capital improvement time. So, yeah, late 60s. It's a long time for that facility.
Well, what happened on that diffuser was when they took the bin out of Shanghai Bin.
Oh, I know very well about that.
And then it changed the pattern of the river, and we're out of water now. So that's why we're in this predicament.
The next project is the wastewater sewer master plan. So the goal is to wrap up the water and then go in and do the same thing for the wastewater. Is to initiate that process and go through to get us a new basis for our needs and establish those a time schedule and a realistic growth for everything that's involved with our wastewater master plan. And then the bottom one here is the sewer collection, rehabilitation, and replacement. With the new rate structure, $1 million annually is started to flow into this account, and it has to do with rehabilitating our sewer lines. I believe we have 330.
I think it's like 287.
287 miles of sewer lines, especially in the little lines that you see, the yellows and the reds around. They're old concrete lines that just are failed or very close to failing. And so the intent is to start putting projects together where we line those pipe, look at different options for trying to be the most efficient to use that money to bring that collection system up, so we don't find ourselves in a potential crisis mode where we have to go in and spend twice as much to fix it. So with that, that's really the priorities for those, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on it.
questions for Rick?
He's there.
Have a nice night. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
All right. Then here's your water.
Apologies.
All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Diana Langley, and I'm the Public Works Director. So I get the fun job tonight of bringing you the proposed water and wastewater rates for this next fiscal year. Something that's always exciting to come before you and talk about a rate increase. So with that said, what are the purpose of rates? The purpose of rates is to ensure that we have adequate revenues in the water and wastewater enterprise funds for operation and maintenance, debt service coverage, and then also capital projects. So operation and maintenance, Robin talked about operation and maintenance earlier today in terms of your operational budget, your staffing, your material services and supplies. Your debt service coverage is to pay back those loans that you've taken out over the years to pay for the various projects at the plants and also within the collection and distribution systems. And then capital projects, it's for those projects that you're going to fund with cash. So for a little bit of background, in April of 2016, the City Council adopted the water and wastewater rate study. The proposed adjustments to the city's water and wastewater rates were for the next 5 years. So the current study is good through fiscal year 2020-2021. So we have 3 remaining years on this study. In June of 2016, Council adopted water and wastewater ordinances. So 2 important things here. As part of the ordinance, it provided that Council would review the rates on an annual basis as part of the fiscal year budget review process. So that's why we're here today before you to talk about the rates. And then, so prior to the July 1st implementation of the increases for each year. If Council recalls last year when we did the July 1st implementation, that's the first time that I can recall in history that we've done a July 1st implementation for rate increases. Typically, we had tried to time it so it wouldn't coincide with the beginning of summer. The reason that we did that last year and why you received comments from customers was that with the July 1st implementation, that applied to the July 1st meter readings, which meant it applied to June consumption. And so some customers came forward and said, hey, why aren't you applying this to July consumption? The reason being is we wanted to get a full fiscal year of the revenue increases. If we had applied it July 1st for consumption going forward, what would have happened was we would have only received rate increases for 11 months out of the 12-month period for the fiscal year, which to compensate would have needed to increase the rates even more because you have a set revenue amount that you're trying to meet. And so if you're only getting that over 11 months instead of 12, it would result in a higher increase. So the other thing that the ordinances set was the council retained the authority to set the rates by resolution. If you recall through the 218 process, that sets the maximum amount. And what council said is we want the flexibility to come forward to the residents and say, set the rates below the 218 amount. And so that's why every single year, we haven't done this in past studies, but I come before you this time of year to tell you here are the proposed rate increases so that council has that flexibility. So for fiscal year 17-18, I'm excited to say that water sales increased 26% as compared to the 17% rate increase. And so my next slide talks about the conservation that we achieved this past year. But that's significant that water sales were 26% higher as compared to the 17% rate increase. Wastewater was more modest, a 10.3% increase as compared to the 10% rate increase. So what does that mean? So if you look at this comparison of 2016 to 2017, what you see is during the summer months for 2017, our customers used more water. In using more water, they went over the base rate. So to explain water bills, you get a base allocation in your water bill. Anything over that, you pay an additional volumetric charge per 100 cubic feet. So during these summer months in 2017, our customers used more water, which is why we had the 26% increase as compared to the 17% rate increase. That means that our revenues were higher than we anticipated for this fiscal year, at least of what we're projecting. So what we did is we worked with our consultant, MBS, who prepared the water and wastewater rate study, and we had them update the models, and we had them utilize data to date for 2017. And from that, they put in our projections, and they came up with these proposed rates. So these proposed rates for fiscal year 18-19 are less than the 218 rates. And so the next slide is going to give you a comparison to show the difference. But I just want to reflect on this for a moment, just so you can see here's the meter size on the left. With the baseline HCS, remember I said that for water, you have a baseline usage. Anything you utilize above that, you pay this volumetric rate at the bottom. Also, as part of the 218 process, what was approved was a baseline that was much lower than what council moved forward with. If you recall, for a 1-inch water service, the baseline was 11 HCF. And then we heard from our customers saying, we don't want that. We don't want you to cut the baseline. And so staff brought before council 3 options for implementation. We brought you what was approved through the 218. We brought you what had been previously the 15 HCF, and then we brought a middle ground that split it at 13 HCF. Council elected to move forward with maintaining the baseline HCF at 15. So for fiscal year 18-19, you can see the Proposition 218 approved rate was $39.49, and we are recommending a proposed rate of $35.84. And then for the volumetric rate, the Proposition 218 approved amount was $1.98, and we're recommending $1.84.
Real quickly, just for clarification for who's in here, our change in bringing it back every year to review, they give us a choice to either do the Prop 18 approved rate or for a proposed rate based upon, the criteria we gave, is that typically the 39.49 would have just been automatically applied with no discussion for the public, no discussion at all. And there would not have been a reduction possibility in the increase and by analysis. So typically it would be 39.49, but we have tasked you and your staff to figure out a way to keep it from that if it so fulfills the 3 items that you had on one of the previous pages, where it took care of the debt service, O&M,
and capital projects
of levels 1 and 2. Is that not correct? Is that correct?
Yeah. So what council elected to do as part of the rate study, we had identified 4 different priorities. So we had projects set aside that were priority 1, priority 2, 3, and 4. Council gave staff direction to include priority 1 and 2 projects within the rate structure.
And one of the reasons we did that is because in the previous rate study did not have sufficient identified increases in the rates for capital improvement. And one of the major complaints that we got while we were going through the process is you didn't invest enough money into it, and that's why we're behind on capital investment. And that was one of the things that was told to us. So we decided we would go the least amount of pain on the increases we could and still accomplish capital improvement funding investments. So
yeah,
remember that.
The other thing that was very dynamic about this rate study is we started it, we were in one stage of the drought. When council adopted the rates, we were kind of in the latter stage of the drought. And so the issue with the city revenues at that time was that the drought had been ongoing for a few years, and so the revenues had lagged compared to what had been anticipated. And so as part of this rate structure, we were making up for lost revenues as part of previous years. So I will note that the proposed rate for this fiscal year is less than what we had projected it would be last year for this fiscal year.
Right.
Okay, so any questions on this slide? All right, so what does this mean in terms of the revenue requirements versus the under the existing and increased rates? So you can see we have 3 years left on this rate structure. And so what this rate structure is allowing us to do, blue is O&M expenses, red is debt service, green and yellow are our capital projects. And so we're able to meet our capital project needs. And then once the rate, the 5-year implementation ends, at that point, prior to that, we will reassess. I will say Ben had noted that we are going through the water master plan process. Just a forewarning, through that water master plan process, there have been a lot of improvements that have been identified for the treatment plant as well as the distribution system. Within the distribution system, that downtown portion between Highway 20, Reeves, and then Cooper to Plumas, those water lines date back to the 1920s. They're 3-inch galvanized lines. And we have a lot of other lines within the distribution system that frankly we have not had the ability to put money towards for replacement. And so this picture looks very good. I'm hoping that we can continue with this, but just forewarning, as I bring forward the water master plan, we will be having discussions about more capital projects that need to be funded in the future. And then in terms of, you've heard a lot of this as we were talking about the rate study, our debt service coverage ratio. So as part of our bond covenants, we're required to maintain a 1.2 debt service coverage ratio. There was a time we were really nervous for water that we were not going to be able to meet it. And basically the covenants say that if you cannot meet it, you need to increase your rates to cover it. So fortunately, the rate increase went through, and you can see that our debt coverage ratio is now increasing. All right, so proposed wastewater rates. Wastewater rates are different than water rates, particularly for residential customers, in that it's a base rate. It's not based upon a volumetric charge. That's different for non-residential. They do pay a base rate, and then they pay a flow charge on top of that. And so for the single family, our current rate is $49.04. We're projecting to go up to $52.96. I'm very happy to say that in the past 2 years, we've set the rates at the 218 level. This year, well, first of all, I just spoiled my whole build up. I got so excited.
Anticipation is
I know, now you have to wait. All right. All right, so for the industrial and septic haulers, here's the rates. Okay, now, so the first time,
There you go.
we're proposing a rate less than the 218 amount for wastewater.
Wonderful.
So this is, in our minds, this is huge, because this is not something we were anticipating. For this fiscal year, it's $1 less, but as you go out, if we continue status quo, you're looking at roughly $3.50 less than what was proposed under the 218.
Sure.
All right. So when you compare the existing versus increased rates, so very similar. Blue is your O&M expenses. Red is your debt service. Green and yellow are your rate-funded capital expenses. So as you can see, with the 3 years left, we're just reaching the peak of those capital projects. And as Ben noted, this next fiscal year, we will be undertaking the update of the wastewater master plan. In terms of the debt coverage ratio, wastewater is in a better situation than water. And then, so what does this mean to our average customer? So our average customer, that's a single family dwelling with 1-inch service. So on the top left, average consumption. So for a normal household, their winter usage is 7 HCF. If you remember on the previous slide that talked about the water rates, our baseline is 15 HCF in terms of what's included in your bill. The average consumption on an annual basis is 15 HCF. And for summer, the average is 24 HCF. So if you, under these proposed rates, the water bill would be $35.84 for the winter and annual, $52.40 a month for the summer, and the proposed sewer bill would be $52.96. So when you combine those, for instance, I'll just take the annual. The current bill right now that somebody pays is $81.62. That bill under this proposed rate structure will increase to $88.80. However, that's much better than the 218 approved amount at $93.44. And as part of that, you are giving customers a higher baseline allocation of water than what was approved through the 218 process. So next steps, resolutions will be coming to council on June 5th for the adoption of these rates. These rates would become effective July 1st, 2018. So very similar to last year, they would go into effect with the July 1st meter readings, which means they will apply to June consumption. And so we're proposing that again. I'm looking at Dale back here because he's.
Do I get to say anything?
You can. And Dale and I have had conversations about this, so I'm really glad to see him here tonight because I know that he has his opinion on how this should be implemented, and so this would be his time to be able to give council some feedback on his proposal. And with that, that's the end of my presentation for tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Diana?
Just to let the folks know here that
You want me to make a comment, is that what?
I think
Go ahead.
And just to let the folks know here that what you propose to council is your rates are gonna go up approximately $7, a hair over $7. And if we would've did the 218, your rates would've went over $12. So doing through this process that we've gone through and doing our wonderful work, we're saving the taxpayers of the community approximately $5 a month, which is $60 a year. That's in your pocket that you can go get dinner with. Just want to let you know. So now you can speak. It's all yours.
My issue about the water.
Yes.
5 years in the past, as far back as I can go on my records, it always went into effect on September the 1st. When the 218 thing went through, when that went through, you raised it up and you started August the 1st. Then the next year, you say, we're gonna raise it July the 1st. But you're going back, you're charging from June the 1st. It really went in for effect June the 1st. And one of the issues that you were wanting to do on the water rates was you wanted to get them to coincide with your fiscal year. July, okay. But you're back charging. So you took from the customers. First year you took one month, shorter them a month on their rates. The next one you took 2 months. You shorted them 2 months, so they only got 10 months. So basically you got the rates three months in advance. So that's my issue, you know, you didn't say anything about it. It's what you said, not what I said. I mean, it's what the past history, the way it's been. So you didn't say that it was the rates are gonna go into effect July the 1st, but we're gonna charge you for what you used from June the 1st. That was never stated. It's always been, am I right or not?
we always stated it would be a July 1st implementation.
When in the past, when did the rates always go into effect? They started August the 1st. From August the 1st, you paid for what you used on those rates the next month. You paid after. So you're billing before you use it. You know, that is just the way you do it. You know, I mean, you change that. And you shorted people, and you still haven't got it for the fiscal year. You're still not charging the rates on the fiscal year.
So I think it's important to clarify our billing system. So we read meters on the 1st of every month. So we read meters. So you read the meter July 1st. That bill goes out towards the end of July. We're not actually collecting the revenues until August. And so we were very clear in the ordinance that it would be a July 1st implementation. We were clear in the rate study that the first year would go into effect August 1st, but then the remaining years after that would go into effect July 1st. And we also acknowledged that that was a change from how we had historically implemented rate increases.
So we may have to agree to disagree on this.
Yeah.
Because we did change. Dale's right, we changed. And so I'm not going to tell him that we did. We did change. And so what Diana described is our current process.
Yeah.
Hey, Dale, what's your last name?
Pardon me?
What's your last name?
I don't know whether I want to tell you that.
For the record, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, thank you. I was forgetting. Okay. Any other questions for Diane?
No, and Diana explained it well, and it's just, I think it's just hard to kind of wrap your mind around it. Had the implementation gone behind that, the rates would have been slightly higher to be able to meet the projections on revenue.
Correct.
For that, so.
So the amount of the money collected would have been the same, period. It would have been still the same amount of money needed to be collected. Also, and I apply this to where on some buildings you pay ahead of time, like your solid waste, you pay your 3 months, although you can delay it out, however long. Because theoretically you pay for service before you get it. This one here is one where you get the service, then you collect on it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can cause a little, I don't know if the word confusion, but a complexity to the process that some other things are much more simple. It took me a while to get through that when we originally did it.
And I think the great thing is once Dale got a little bit ticked off at us, he's been at almost every council.
That's good. We like seeing that.
I know.
Good sounding board, really.
All right, any other questions?
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Diana. All right.
Oh, well, Diana, can we, if the newsletters, if the water bills haven't been printed out yet, can we put a little thing on bills saying your bill will be, it's going up July 1st and it will be June's readings for July 1st. That way to take care of the people that they'll get.
Nothing's passed council yet.
Well,
Yeah.
But
It
it's,
goes to council on June 5th.
yeah,
And so we can try to coordinate, I don't know, we can probably make the cutoff for the billing that goes out late June to include something in that
okay,
bill.
yeah, okay. Just to let them know,
Right.
let the folks know. 'Cause
Okay, thank you.
All right. So that takes care of that general item. Next, we just have appearance of interested citizens. Members of the public may address the city council concerning any item that has been described in the notice of this meeting because it is a special meeting. Anybody wish to speak?
I have something to say.
Yes.
As an ex-city employee for quite a long time and a resident and when operating a business, it's neat to see the projects that have been discussed for years and years and years coming to fruition. And I commend the council for their leadership and the staff. You guys are doing a great job. And I just want to let you know, from someone who was engaged in the process way back when, things are happening. It's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Oh, yes.
Just real quick for Dale, and I'm calling you Dale because I didn't hear your last name to say Mr. appropriately, so I apologize. What they were explaining with this whole water deal, I used to run a water and sewer system in Yolo County for one of our county service areas. We went through the same issues with billing, and to be honest with you, it's standard practice across just about every jurisdiction in this entire country with the way they do the billing because of how fiscal year works. I sat in a room with about 10 times the amount of people as this, not being the CSA manager by myself trying to explain this to people and not have them string me up. So I understand getting upset about it because it does seem weird, but it's really, honest to God, it's a standard practice. I went through it plenty of times myself.
Well, then Yuba City was out of standard practice for many years.
Yes.
Well, there is going to be that. There's going to be that. Yeah, I mean, before and after deal. What it sounds like to me is they finally got it right and doing it the way it should be done. I mean, honestly, that's how it's supposed to be done. So, to be honest, I mean, not that I'm in the city, but I'm telling you what, whatever Public Works is doing, dude, they are kicking butt as far as any other community in this area. So be happy.
Steve.
And be happy that Diana's nice.
Steve, are you still paying this guy?
No, Diana is now. Be happy that Diana's nice. I've worked for some public work directors, and I've worked with some public works directors. But believe me, man, you'd have been thrown out on your ear for even bringing that up.
Well, okay, that would bring up another conversation.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, that will go ahead and adjourn for the evening. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.